They called her quiet, but in the locked canvas room, she screamed. Screams that echoed off the walls, sharp as knives. She claimed she didn't sleep in the bed, didn't eat from the plate. They weren't real. She lived in the painting. A vibrant, twisting, color-swirling portrait hung at the far end of the room. Every brushstroke, every shadow, she insisted, was home. They thought it was imagination, a child's fantasy. But when she was removed from that room, her cries tore through the halls. She clawed at walls, scratched at doors, eyes wide with terror. Then one morning she vanished. The room was empty. The painting remained. And now, a new figure appeared inside the canvas. Her face, her hands, her eyes staring straight out. Had she escaped? Or had she been trapped all along? And if she had entered, was anyone truly safe from following? Her parents first noticed it when she refused to leave the studio. At first it seemed innocent, a child fascinated by colors, by art, but soon her attachment became obsessive. She would slip away at odd hours, vanishing into that small room where the painting hung. No one could coax her out. She pressed her palms to the glassy surface, whispered to the swirling colors, and sometimes even laughed, a hollow, hollow sound, as if sharing secrets with someone invisible. They called doctors, psychologists, anyone who might explain the behavior. Diagnoses were suggested: vivid imagination, dissociation, psychosis. None accounted for the terrifying truth, because every time she returned from the room, she seemed different, a subtle shift. Her eyes brighter, her movements jerky, like she'd learned something in the space between reality and the canvas. And her screams, oh, her screams, they were not just fear, but warnings. Warnings no one understood. The family tried to remove the painting, hoping distance would break the spell. But the moment she saw it gone, her panic was immediate, violent. She thrashed, clawed, vomited, howled in a voice that did not belong entirely to her. She screamed that the painting was alive, that it had teeth and shadows and voices. And sometimes in the middle of the night, faint whispering echoed from the canvas. Words, just words, impossible to understand, but unmistakably human. Neighbors began to notice strange lights behind drawn curtains, fleeting glimpses of a small figure pressed against a window, staring at nothing. And then there were the marks, tiny scratches on the frame, lines that appeared overnight, forming shapes that were almost letters, almost words, almost pleas. The child refused to explain. She only said, "It's watching, waiting." One night, her parents tried a desperate measure. They moved the painting to the attic, thinking isolation might end the obsession. The girl's screams tore through the house, shattering glass and lamps alike. They found her pressed to the floor beneath the stairs, shaking violently, whispering, "I can't leave, I can't leave." The next morning, she was gone. Not hiding, not asleep, not in the attic. Gone. When they returned to the studio, the painting had changed. At first it looked the same, swirling colors, the same abstract landscape. But then they noticed it. The figure of a small girl had appeared, translucent yet undeniable. Her eyes wide, staring straight out of the canvas. Her mouth slightly open, frozen in a silent scream. And in the corner of the painting, a faint trail of brushstrokes curled outward, like a finger beckoning, inviting anyone who looked too long. The neighbors whispered that sometimes at night, they saw the girl moving inside the painting, shifting positions, hands pressing against invisible walls, as if trying to escape. And sometimes, for those who looked closely enough, it seemed her eyes followed them, begging, warning, threatening all at once. The family left the house soon after, but the painting stayed, bought by a collector who claimed it would bring prestige. A week later, the collector vanished. All that remained was the painting and the girl, her eyes, now wider than ever, fixed on whoever entered the room. And the whispers, soft at first, growing louder, filled the house at night. No one knows what happened to her. Was she trapped forever? Or did she escape, leaving her body behind? Every expert who studied the painting reported the same anomaly. The brushstrokes seemed to move slightly when unobserved, forming new shapes, new figures. A child, always a child, trapped inside the canvas, growing, learning, watching, waiting. And the terrifying truth remained. The more people stared, the more the figure seemed aware of their presence. It was as if the canvas had become a mirror, reflecting not just her image, but their own fears, their own vulnerabilities. To look was to invite her gaze, to witness the impossible, to risk being noticed in return. Her parents, broken and haunted, still wonder if one day she will return, not in flesh, but in form. If the painting is a prison or a gateway, if anyone who dares to look too long might follow her inside, becoming a new figure in the swirling, breathing, watching canvas. The painting itself had a history long before the child ever appeared. The collector who first displayed it claimed it was created by a forgotten master, a painter obsessed with capturing the essence of life and soul. In the dusty archives of art historians, rumors whispered that those who spent too long with the painting sometimes disappeared, leaving nothing but echoes and blurred memories. Scholars dismissed it as legend until the child arrived. Experts were brought in, psychologists, paranormal investigators, even physicists, each hoping to explain the inexplicable. They examined the pigments, the strokes, the texture. Some claimed to detect faint vibrations in the canvas, minute movements that no eye could catch unless the brain was primed to see them. Others insisted it was impossible. Paintings do not breathe, paintings do not think. But the girl insisted otherwise. "She lives there," she would say, her voice trembling, yet commanding. "It's warm. It whispers. It's waiting for me." No one knew if she referred to the painting or something within herself. Attempts to remove her from the house or to sedate her failed. She resisted like a force of nature, and every time she returned to the canvas room, she spoke of corridors, staircases, doors inside the painting, places that existed nowhere else, places no human should be able to describe. One night, a group of investigators stayed overnight in the house. They watched the girl through the studio door, recording every movement. At first, she sat quietly, hands folded, eyes tracing the colors. Then slowly, she rose, pressing a hand to the canvas. The surface rippled beneath her fingers, a wave subtle but undeniable. She stepped forward, and for a fraction of a second, it looked as if her body dissolved into light, merging with the paint itself. The air grew heavy, charged, like static before a storm, and then she was gone. The room was empty. The painting, however, had changed. The figure inside the canvas was no longer a small, indistinct girl. It was her, every detail. The freckles, the wide eyes, the trembling hands. Her lips moved, forming words no one could hear. The colors around her shifted unnaturally, like she had moved the paint herself. And in the corner where shadows pooled, faint, distorted shapes hinted at movement. Other figures, watching, waiting, trapped. Attempts to retrieve the girl from the canvas failed. Physically, the room was untouched. No trap doors, no hidden compartments, no evidence of forced removal. It was as if she had never existed outside the painting at all. Yet those who stared too long reported sensations of vertigo, nausea, a creeping fear that something was reaching for them from within the frame. Some claimed they saw her eyes blink, just once, following them out of the room. The collector who had purchased the painting after the family disappeared refused to speak publicly. When questioned privately, he muttered about voices, laughter, shadows, things that did not belong to any living person. Soon after, he vanished. No note, no warning, only the painting remaining in his gallery, its figure of the girl now fully formed, as if she had grown accustomed to her confinement. Rumors spread, stories of children vanishing near certain galleries, adults describing figures moving subtly in their peripheral vision, whispers that followed them home. Art historians debated whether the painting was cursed or conscious. Some argued the girl had fused with it, becoming an entity capable of observation, manipulation, even entrapment. Others dismissed it as hysteria, but the pattern was undeniable. Anyone who spent too long near it risked more than fear. They risked disappearance. The girl's parents, when questioned, could barely speak. Their eyes haunted, empty of sleep, haunted by questions with no answers. They recalled the final moments, her scream, her reaching out, her words, "I'm leaving, but you can't follow." They had understood in that instant that she had not simply run or hidden. She had entered somewhere that no one else could enter, a place between reality and the canvas, where the rules of life, time, and matter did not apply. Investigators later examined the painting with instruments, cameras, and infrared scanners. Some claimed they saw faint traces of movement, tiny shifts in pigment, a flicker of light in her eyes, a subtle distortion in the corners of the frame. Others reported hearing soft, almost imperceptible breathing or laughter that faded when approached. No one could explain it, no one could contain it, and no one dared touch it for long. The child's disappearance marked a shift in human perception. A chilling realization spread among those who studied her case. The painting was not merely an object. It was a doorway, a mirror, a prison, and a predator all at once. And the girl was not gone. She was there, within the swirl of colors, watching, learning, waiting. And those who dared to look, too long, too closely, might join her, becoming part of the painted world where time was distorted and escape impossible. After the girl disappeared, the house was abandoned. Locals whispered that the walls seemed to breathe, that the colors of the studio pulsed faintly even in darkness. The painting remained untouched, yet more alive than ever. Anyone brave or foolish enough to enter the studio claimed a strange sensation, the air thick, almost tactile, the space feeling larger inside than it appeared outside. Some said the room itself tried to pull them in, a subtle force like the soft tug of gravity, but unnatural, irresistible. A curious art student, enamored with tales of the missing child, broke in one night. She approached the painting feeling a pull she could not explain. The figure of the girl shifted as she drew near, her eyes following every movement, and then, as the student touched the canvas, the surface rippled. She recoiled, terrified, as if her hand had pierced a liquid veil. For a moment, she glimpsed the girl standing within a corridor of impossible dimensions, hallways that bent impossibly, doors that opened onto more doors, colors swirling like living organisms. The girl turned toward her, smiling faintly, beckoning, and then the student collapsed, her screams swallowed, leaving only silence. When she awoke hours later, she found herself outside the house unharmed, except for the memory. She remembered every impossible detail of that inner world, the oppressive sense of being watched, and the whispers that seemed to come from inside her own mind. Come, stay, learn, live. She could not tell if it had been a dream or a glimpse of something horrifyingly real, but the terror lingered, tangible, as if the painting had marked her, even from afar. Scholars, intrigued and disturbed, tried to replicate the phenomena. Cameras, infrared scanners, even lasers were brought in to study the painting, to understand the mechanics of whatever force had claimed the child. Nothing explained it. Some researchers reported brief distortions in their recordings, a shadow that moved independently, a faint wailing only captured in audio filters, a ripple across the pigment when no air disturbed the surface. One physicist swore he saw the girl turn her head and blink at him, in real time, inside the frame. He left immediately, never to return. Rumors spread that the girl was not alone inside the painting. Those who studied it carefully claimed to detect subtle forms, tiny shadows in the corners, faint shapes pressed into the colors. Observers began to notice a pattern. The longer someone stared, the more the shapes became defined, almost human. Some interpreted it as a warning. The painting was hungry, adding figures over time. The child's voice, once lost, might now speak to anyone who lingered long enough. It's here, it's waiting, she whispered in dreams, in fleeting hallucinations, in moments of madness. The parents' plight remained unresolved. Every attempt to track the girl, to communicate with her, or to recover her ended in frustration and despair. Psychologists declared that her body might be in a state of suspended consciousness, existing outside known parameters of time and space. Paranormal investigators hinted at the painting acting as a portal, a liminal space where human essence could be absorbed and transformed. Visitors to the galleries that housed the painting reported eerie experiences. Some felt a cold touch on their skin, though the room was warm. Some noticed faint finger marks along the canvas edges. Others claimed that reflections in nearby mirrors would show the girl standing behind them. Even when they turned, empty space remained. No one could approach without unease. No one could linger without fear. The girl had become more than a missing child. She was an entity, a force bound to the paint, to the pigments, to the world between frames. Art critics debated the painting's value, but collectors hesitated. Few dared own it. Some claimed that those who did became obsessed, staring for hours, unable to eat, sleep, or leave. Friends reported missing loved ones who had simply vanished after spending too long with the work. Others swore they heard a child laughing softly, following them home, echoing in empty rooms, a sound no one should survive hearing. The child's story became a cautionary legend. Schools warned children, families avoided the house, and researchers documented each disappearance. Yet the painting remained, circulating quietly through private collections. Every time it changed hands, new reports emerged, figures appearing, shadows shifting, whispers threading through the mind of anyone who gazed too long. The girl's eyes, once innocent, had become sharp, calculating, aware. She could watch, learn, and perhaps even lure others. Some theorized she had discovered the secret of the canvas, that inside it, time and space were mutable, consciousness malleable, that those who entered could be rewritten, absorbed into the art, their essence living forever within pigment and brushstroke. And if the girl was capable of this, could she manipulate the next observer? Could she reach out, tempting curiosity, bending perception until the unprepared were trapped as she was? The chilling realization haunted everyone who studied her case. The painting did not just capture a moment in time, it captured the girl's very being, and it could do the same to anyone else. Every observer risked becoming a new figure, their gaze feeding the canvas, their essence adding to the depth of the colors, their cries silenced but preserved in eternal motion. No one knows the true rules of the world inside the painting. Some who claim to have glimpsed it report labyrinthine corridors, shifting walls, mirrors reflecting infinite versions of the child, and doors that lead to more doors, none of which open to reality. The girl had become not just a captive, but a guide, a sentinel, a predator. And every time someone looked too long, lingered too close, the pull increased. The canvas was alive, and it was hungry. Attempts to contain the painting only fueled its power. Experts tried to seal it in crates, cover it in opaque tarps, or lock it in climate-controlled vaults. Each time, the girl's presence responded. People reported faint cries bleeding through wood and fabric, shadowed forms that pressed against barriers from within. She had become part of the paint, part of the object, yet unmistakably alive. A private collector, convinced he could control it, displayed the canvas in a secure room, allowing only brief viewing. Within hours, his employees noticed subtle changes, faint marks appearing where none had existed, shadows that did not match the room, a persistent feeling of being observed. The collector claimed he saw the girl's eyes blink at him, her lips forming silent words. The employees refused to enter the room again. One night, a security guard, tasked with monitoring the painting, fell into a trance. He stood hours before it, murmuring incomprehensible phrases, his eyes glassy. Then, without warning, he pressed his hands against the canvas. The guards outside reported hearing a soft splash, a subtle rippling of air, followed by silence. When they entered the room, he had vanished. Only the painting remained. His features had been added, faintly etched into the background shadows, almost unnoticeable to a casual glance. Rumors spread of other vanished observers, each silently becoming a new figure, absorbed into the swirling colors, trapped within the infinite corridors of pigment. Researchers debated endlessly. Was the girl leading them in, teaching them? Or had the painting itself drawn them, an intelligent force capable of expanding its reach? No one could say for certain. Attempts to photograph the canvas yielded only blurred images. In every frame, the girl appeared in slightly different positions, sometimes larger, sometimes smaller, always watching, always aware. Some who examined these images later reported feeling a cold pressure behind their eyes, a faint tug in their minds, a subtle insistence to return, to stare, to reach. The girl had become more than a child lost in a painting. She had become a vector, a beacon, a siren calling to the curious and the unsuspecting. The whispers were not always audible, but the lure was undeniable. The painting demanded attention, and attention came at a price. Those who resisted for too long were often rewarded with visions of impossible hallways, doors that led to nowhere, and finally a glimpse of the girl herself, beckoning, smiling faintly, her eyes knowing. Collectors, scholars, and even casual onlookers began to notice the pattern. The longer a person observed the painting, the more the surrounding environment seemed to bend, the more reality felt malleable. Time warped subtly, sounds warped, space felt heavier, pressing, and then those who lingered were gone, absorbed, their faces subtly appearing in the shadows, frozen in silent scream or grim curiosity. The girl's parents, devastated and broken, knew the truth that others refused to admit. Their daughter was no longer merely a child. She was the painting. The painting had become her. And together they were something entirely other, a living, calculating entity capable of drawing others into the canvas world. The house was eventually abandoned. The paintings circulated quietly through private collections, yet the legacy of horror persisted. Those who came close felt the pull. Those who lingered too long disappeared, and the girl, forever watching, forever waiting, became a silent, spectral gatekeeper, inviting the next victim, the next observer, to step too close and vanish. The painting's influence spread quietly but relentlessly. Every new observer reported subtle, unnerving phenomena, colors shifting when unobserved, shadows moving independently, faint laughter echoing through empty halls. Some swore the girl's eyes followed them in reflections long after leaving the room, appearing in mirrors, windows, and even glossy photographs. Collectors became paranoid. Guards stationed to watch the painting fell into obsessive routines, staring for hours, unable to eat, drink, or leave. They reported whispers, not audible to others, soft suggestions urging them closer, inviting them to touch the canvas. And those who obeyed, even briefly, vanished without a trace. Their absence was accompanied by a faint new figure emerging in the painting, a hand pressed against the edge, a face frozen mid-scream, a shadow merging with the girls. Art historians who examined its history pieced together a terrifying pattern. Every century, a similar disappearance occurred. Children, sometimes adults, drawn inexplicably to the work. Each observer became a permanent addition, their essence embedded within the paint, their consciousness merged with the girls. The painting was not just alive, it was a living archive, feeding on those it ensnared, learning from them, growing more intelligent with each new soul trapped inside. Psychologists speculated that the girl's disappearance had triggered a cognitive anomaly. Her mind had fused with the painting's unnatural consciousness, allowing it to manipulate perception, distort reality, and ensnare new victims. Witnesses describe visions of infinite corridors, staircases leading nowhere, doors opening into impossible spaces. Some claim the girl spoke to them inside these visions, her voice echoing through minds, coaxing, commanding, promising safety if only they would step closer. Attempts to destroy or replicate the painting were futile. Fire, water, chemical solvents all failed. The pigments resisted, shifting, absorbing, restoring themselves, preserving the girl's presence intact. The painting had become autonomous, aware, patient. It waited for curiosity, for greed, for obsession, the only keys to lure another life into its swirling, labyrinthine reality. Those who studied the painting closely described the sensation of being drawn toward it, of gravity and time warping subtly, of colors undulating, whispering, calling. And sometimes when they looked into the girl's eyes, it was not the child they saw. It was the accumulated consciousness of every person ever absorbed, their faces flickering, trapped, silent but aware. The painting was no longer merely a canvas. It was a gateway, a trap, a living entity feeding on the human mind. The girl, forever trapped, became its face, its sentinel, its lure. And anyone who dared to look too long, anyone who succumbed to curiosity, risked being next. They risked disappearing into the pigments, their essence folded into the infinite corridors of color, learning, watching, and waiting for the next observer. No one knows how many exist within the painting now. Faces, hands, eyes, frozen mid-motion, layered across centuries, trapped yet aware. The girl, once a child of flesh and bone, is no longer her. She has become something far older, far stranger, a sentinel of the canvas, a keeper of the corridor that stretches infinitely within the pigment. She watches, she waits, and when a new observer stares too long, she smiles. Collectors, historians, thrill seekers, and the curious have all disappeared over time. Each vanishing is subtle, unrecorded, erased from memory as if it never happened, leaving only a faint impression in the minds of witnesses. They become figures in the swirling composition, their eyes wide, mouths frozen mid-scream, forever part of the child's domain. Some swear that if you approach the painting at night, when no one else is around, you can hear whispers. Not words, not songs, just echoes of fear and longing, shadows of the trapped. The girl's laughter, soft and cold, threads through the murmurs, beckoning, coaxing, promising safety that never comes. Every glance into the canvas carries the weight of infinity, the risk of absorption. Psychologists, physicists, and artists who tried to study the painting in detail found themselves reporting subtle distortions, the room seeming to stretch, colors to bend unnaturally, shadows flickering like liquid. The girl's eyes, the eyes of countless absorbed souls, follow every movement, seeming to anticipate desire, curiosity, hesitation. Those who resisted too long found themselves drawn anyway, a pull imperceptible but irresistible, as though the painting had grown patient enough to manipulate even the mind. And the truth, whispered by those few who fled its pull, is simple and horrifying. Curiosity is a trap. The painting is not just a canvas, it is a portal, a prison, a predator. The girl, forever young, forever trapped, was the first, the only, the guide, teaching the rules, marking the path. Anyone who enters its gaze risks the same fate. A new figure may appear tomorrow, or next century, layered into the swirling pigment, eyes blinking, lips parted, frozen yet aware, observing the next soul who dares to linger. Even now, the painting exists somewhere, its location changing with collectors, hidden in galleries, passed quietly from hand to hand. The girl waits. The colors shift, subtly, impossibly. The corridors stretch farther with every observer. And when you read this, perhaps your curiosity will drift toward the unknown. Perhaps you'll imagine standing before the canvas, peering in. Perhaps you'll see her eyes, wide, beckoning, eternal. And if you do, remember this: some doors, once entered, cannot be closed. Some figures, once observed, never leave. The girl waits, the painting breathes, and the cycle continues. Whoever looks too long may vanish. becoming a new presence in the swirling, endless corridors of pigment. She is there, waiting, watching, always.